Hi, and welcome to the Meal-O-Matic demo video. Meal-O-Matic is a nutrition and cooking app for the iPhone and iPad that integrates nutrition, recipe and inventory management, a calendar, and a shopping list. In this video, I'm going to show you the basic features of Meal-O-Matic. The first time you use the app, you might want to tap on the Features button, which will explain a lot of the functions of the app and how to access them. When you're done with that, tap any of these buttons to get started. I'd suggest doing your inventory first, so let's start off there. You use the inventory to track what you have at home and when things are expiring. The recipe database also uses the inventory to find recipes that use only the foods you have and recipes that include your nearly expired foods. Also, when you add recipes to the calendar, only foods not in your inventory are added to the shopping list. So we can first input what we have at home so the recipe database, calendar, and shopping list can coordinate correctly. You see a list of foods organized by category, and you can search through this list by tapping on the search bar, or minimize and maximize the categories by tapping on the plus and minus buttons. There are 3 buttons next to each food. The button on the left shows the food's nutrient density score, a measure of how nutritious the food is. Tapping on this button will show detailed nutrition info for the food. Here, you'll find nutrition facts for about 30 different nutrients, for which most have daily recommended intakes from the USDA. These values are mostly from the USDA Food Nutrition Database and the UK Nutrient Data Bank. You should treat them as no more than good estimates, since there are a lot of factors that can affect the nutrition of a food, such as its source, storage, and preparation. If you have more accurate data for a particular food that you frequently eat, you can edit these values by tapping on a nutrient. It's nice to have all this data, but it can be hard to keep track of so many numbers, so Meal-O-Matic calculates a single score called a nutrient density score, which can give an indication of how nutritious a food is per calorie. There's no standard measure of nutrient density, so Meal-O-Matic uses its own formula for calculating it. Meal-O-Matic scales the amount of a food up to your average daily calorie requirement, and then checks how well your daily nutrient requirements are satisfied with that amount of food. This is a bit like saying, if all I ate today was this food, how well would my nutrient requirements be satisfied? You should specify your daily requirements in the settings by tapping on the oven icon, and then on settings, and then on daily intake limits. You should check with a nutritionist or another reliable source as to how much of each of these you should have each day. Most pages will have a button like this which will bring up help. There's a link in this one to recommended intake ranges published by the Food and Nutrition Board. You can set lower and upper limits for each of these nutrients. If there's no upper limit, set it to 0 as you see for fiber here. The nutrient density score for a food is calculated by taking an amount of food containing your average energy intake, in this case 1,900 calories, and calculating the amount of each nutrient for that quantity of food. If the amount of a nutrient is within the range set here, then the food will get a score of 100 for that nutrient. The scores the food get for the different nutrients are then averaged to get the nutrient density. The nutrient density will range between minus 100 and plus 100. Tapping on each of these bars shows you how this food scores for the different nutrients. While this score is not the only thing to think about when deciding what foods to eat, it could alert you to some unhealthy components of your diet. You could also use it to make quick comparisons of the nutritiousness of different foods. For example, on this screen you could quickly see that mushrooms would be likely to satisfy more daily requirements than steak would. Tap the shopping basket button to add a food to the shopping list. If it has been added to the shopping list, you will see that the icon is darkened. Tap again to remove it from the shopping list. The button on the right shows the expiration status of the food. If it is green, the food is far from expired. If it's yellow, nearly expired. If red, already expired. And if blue, there's no shelf life set for the food. You can set how many days before expiration the icon turns yellow in the settings. The status of the food resets every time you set it in stock or if you check it off your shopping list. This button brings down a menu. Most screens will have a menu like this. Tap on this button to scroll up to the search bar. On this one to minimize all categories, which makes it easier to browse to different categories, and on this one to maximize all categories. This button is for editing categories. One cool thing you can see in the category editing screen is the average nutrient density of the foods in a category. Here you can see that the scores Meal-O-Matic calculates are generally consistent with recommendations made by the USDA and Harvard School of Nutrition to eat more vegetables, fruits, and grains than meat, dairy, and sweets. And that among the different categories of meat, fish is among those that are better for you. So while you should treat the nutrient densities as only estimates of how well foods satisfy nutrition requirements, you should on average be able to use the nutrient densities to help guide your eating. To add foods to your inventory, tap the plus button at the top right. Here, you will see a list of all foods in the database. Add foods to your inventory by tapping the Stocked Status button. When a food is unstocked, the button is light gray, and when stocked, the button will be colored and have a cutout shape. If you don't find the food you're looking for, you can add a new one with the plus button. If you need to edit any settings for a food, tap on it. Hopefully, you won't need to come to the screen very often, but you can use it to add other names for a food, which helps in searching and ingredient recognition when you're editing or importing recipes. And here you can set the age if needed. A density is needed if you use volume units for a food in a recipe and you want to correctly calculate the nutrition for that recipe. Here you can set the categories this food is in, and here, substitutes for the food. Substitutes are only used to calculate how many ingredients are missing from a recipe. Variants of a food are usually more specific versions of it. Recipes sometimes call for a specific variant of a food, and sometimes for the generic food itself. Nutrition data, however, is mostly available only for specific variants. Organizing foods into generic versions and their variants allows us to average the data for the different variants and still be able to calculate nutrition for a recipe when it doesn't specify which specific variant of a food to use. You can add or remove variants if needed. We've now explored the major functions of the inventory. If you need more detailed explanations, tap on the Help button that can be found on most screens.